Phil Loring. I am the Arrell Chair in Food Policy and Society at the University of Guelph. Really excited to have you with us today to speak with Dr. Milliam Belay as one of our keynote guests for the Arrell Food Summit. Dr. Belay coordinates the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, which is a network of major networks in Africa. And he's also a member of the International Panel of Experts on Sustainable Food Systems. Likewise, Milliam is a founder of Melka Ethiopia, which is an indigenous non-governmental organization working on issues of agroecology, intergenerational learning, advocacy, and livelihood improvement for local and indigenous peoples. Milliam has been working over 2 decades on the issues of intergenerational learning about cultural diversity, sustainable agriculture, and the rights of local communities for seed and food sovereignty and forest issues. His main interest is now advocacy on food sovereignty, learning among generations, knowledge dialogues, and the use of participatory mapping for social learning. He has a PhD in environmental learning and an MSc in tourism conservation and a BSc in biology. And let me just say, I'm super excited to have him joining us for this event. So thank you very much, Milliam, for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
So let's sort of dive right into the conversation that we have planned. I'm really excited to hear your answers to some of these questions. And maybe we'll start by talking about food sovereignty at a high level. It's a term that many people use or hear, but it's rarely spelled out in a way that I think connects with people. So it's just sort of this cloudy idea that gets used a lot and rarely specified. I wonder if you can tell me what it means to you and to the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa.
I think probably it's important to bring in also other terms which are used besides food sovereignty, food security and the right to food. So and in order to understand food sovereignty, probably it's good to understand what food security is. As you know, the terms food security came first, and the first agenda for food security was availability, and later people feel that where food can be available, but if people do not have the financial and physical accessibility, then it cannot be food secure. So access came, and later, while you can have access to food, but it has to be useful. There has to be culturally appropriate. We need to bring issues of sanitation and water and other resources. So usefulness came. Later, people say that, well, it can be available, accessible, and useful, but it has to be there all the time, you see?
Right.
So another concept came in, the concept of stability. But now the current understanding is that they have included agency, instead of food being available to you or accessible to you, food coming from outside, I think you have to have control over the kind of food that you produce, so you have to have agency, and the food should also be sustainable. So it's where it is now in terms of food security. But in the question of who ensures food security came in, and because of that question, and the right to food concept came in, and in the right to food, I think in short, people are divided into two: the right holders and the duty bearers. The duty bearers are governments, and the right holders are local communities. So the duty bearers, which are governments, should ensure that there is food security, meaning that food should be available and secure and useful and stable throughout the year. So then the idea of the right to food starts to appear in big government concepts. There is still argument over what the source of food sovereignty is, Has it originated from the Mexican government in the 1980s, as they say, or has it come out of the social movements or out of ideas which have started in the 1980s, in the 1960s, 80s, and whatever. So there is still questions and discussions and arguments about its origin, but basically the way food sovereignty differs with the others is that one, food security can come. The food security is basically, it doesn't talk about where the food comes from,
Mm-hmm.
The food can come and it can be grown in any way. For example, one of the arguments is that governments, to ensure food security, they can grow food through industrial agriculture way, And we all know the impacts of industrial agriculture, to health and nutrition and environment and whatever. But they can make you food secure. You can have food available on your table, but through what cost? And also the question of political power and the power analysis came into the picture, who controls food, who controls the means of production, and also who controls the food system in general. There's a food chain, from production to storage and distribution, consumption. So food security does not have answered those questions. So that's where the issue of food sovereignty start to come in. So people have to produce their own food on the land that they control. On the seeds, the seeds are very much important components of the food security. Food sovereignty, because in food security, you can produce food in an environment where seeds are controlled by few actors.
Mm.
But in food sovereignty, I think the control of seeds should be with the farmers. Who ensures the diversity of the seeds also at the farmers level? Who controls water, marketing, who controls the market? These are all questions. And also in food sovereignty, the way food is produced is very much important. It has to be produced in a manner where the biosphere is, cannot keep it intact. That's agriculture can never keep the biosphere intact, but without affecting the biosphere in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
So the how food is produced is very much important. And the cultural importance of food is very much emphasized in food sovereignty. The knowledge of farmers about the seeds, about the land, and about the environment and everything, their spirituality is very much important in food sovereignty. And in addition to that, the political question. So that's how food sovereignty is. I know that there are lots and lots of questions around the concept of food sovereignty, where marketing falls, and who ensures food sovereignty, and how does food sovereignty at the local level contrasts with sovereignty at the national level. There are a lot of questions around food sovereignty. I want to emphasize that it's not a fixed concept. It's a developing, rapidly evolving concept. Because as food sovereignty recognizes, food production, marketing, consumption is contextual.
Right.
So the context in Canada and the context in Africa, is different. Even in the context, food sovereignty, I'm an Ethiopian, I come from Ethiopia. So the food sovereignty in the southern part of Ethiopia, food sovereignty with pastoralists in Ethiopia, with food sovereignty and agrarian community in Ethiopia. It is quite, it has its own differences.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe as a way to make the discussion a little bit more practical or tangible and really sort of dig into some of the place-based aspects, maybe you could tell us a little bit about the work that the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa that the work that you do and the work that that organization does as its mission.
The alliance is the largest alliance in Africa now. Out of the 55 African countries, we work in 50 of them. Mostly in Western, Eastern, Southern, and Central Africa, but we have started working with Northern Africa food sovereignty movements. We're starting to work with them now. So it's a continental civil society movement. It's a broad-based, we have it's a network of networks. We have farmer networks, fisher folk networks, pastoralist networks, indigenous peoples networks, consumer networks, youth networks, women networks, faith-based institution networks, civil society networks. We have them all. It's a broad-based civil society group. Basically, we work with two hands. On one hand, we fight, and on the other hand, we propose, as a solution. The fighting side is fighting the appropriation of African life, basically African land, African water, African agriculture system, African seeds. We're fighting with those actors who are bringing in a models of development who doesn't work for us. We're fighting with a narrative, with the industrial agricultural narrative, which is a very, very powerful narrative. I think we can talk a little bit about that later. But on the other hand, we propose agroecology as a way forward for Africa in the context of food sovereignty. We asked ourselves in 2013 whether agroecology works in Africa or not. Does agroecology work? Or are we inheriting these coming terms from Latin America or from social movements? And we start to research, we do research. So we collected over 80 cases from all over Africa, which you can find on our website. And what we found was astounding array of agroecological work in Africa, agroecological activities. And we did kind of a meta-analysis of all these cases. And we could see that they increase food production. Agroecology increases food production, which is very much important. Agroecology improves soil. Soil is very, very critical, for so many reasons. It increases biodiversity, agrobiodiversity. It works with that. And it is based on farmers' knowledge, but it doesn't reject science at all. It is a cutting-edge science, agroecology is, that's what we believe. Agroecology also increases people's reliance on themselves, So just by looking at this, we say that I think agroecology can work for Africa. We're convinced. And now currently we have moved into the food system arena. Last week we have had a big conference, a virtual conference, the third biennial conference on food system in Africa. So we work on at the food system level. Currently we are working on developing a food policy for Africa, which is a very, very exciting process because about 20 to 30 countries are having a discussion around country level food policy. Then what we are trying to do is collect the results of these cases and propose a policy for Africa. Basically, up to now, the policy production process in Africa is top down. But we just wanted to change that, and we wanted to propose a solution at the African Union level, and we are working with the African Union to do that. So, yeah. So,
I see. Yeah. I wonder if we can spend a bit more time for our audience's purposes on agroecology and sort of what it is and the debates around it, because I know I've seen plenty of research that's positive about agroecology, and you've just described the research that you've been doing with the Alliance. But many people also, when rightly or not, challenge its potential and argue instead for the power of technologies like genetic modification and chemical-based inputs and so forth. And how do you respond to those critiques, and what is it about agroecology that what alternative is it providing? How do you respond to that?
Why, when I am asked that question, I respond with a question. What is the importance of agriculture? Why do we do agriculture? Is it to produce more food? Yeah, we need to produce more food. Farmers produce more food and they take it out to the market, they get more money, and they can feed also the other sectors of the population. And currently, almost, I cannot say all of them, but the majority of the policies surround around this issue. Food production, more food production. We call it even a productivist paradigm. So improved variety of seeds, irrigation, large-scale irrigation, agrochemicals, and all that is recommended to produce more food. But there are other layers of critical question. For example, what about nutrition? So is it to produce more food, which is nutritious? What about health? Is it to produce more food, which is healthy and nutritious? What about the environment? Is it to produce more food, which is healthy and nutritious without impacting the environment or the biosphere? It's a very critical question. Is it to produce more food, which is nutritious and healthy without impacting the environment, which is culturally appropriate? Food is a cultural product, as you know, in so many ways. And is it to produce more food, healthy food, nutritious food, without impacting the environment, culturally appropriate, and in the right way, right-based approach, human rights? So the current industrial paradigm takes the first one in most of the cases. And now, increasingly due to the health crisis, the nutrition and health side of it is coming more and more into through policy. And environmental policy is also coming, as the recent revision of the concept of food security shows us. But it's not there yet environmentally, this true cost accounting, the true cost accounting. What is the cost of producing more food? This is not done, If we include health impact, nutritional impact, environmental impact, the cultural erosion impact, what have we produced, you see? And culture is not considered at all. You don't see discussion around culture in policy environments where agroecology is discussed. Right? Who's right, So look at agroecology now. Does it respond to the production of more food? Yeah. I think any farmer can tell you that if the soil is good, the soil is right, and with enhancing the productivity of that food, we're not romanticizing the seed that is in the hands of farmers also. It needs enhancement, but that enhancement can happen in collaboration with conventional scientists. It's possible for two of them to work together. So more production is possible through agroecology. And the food that is produced through agroecological means is nutritious in most of the cases because it's diverse and it's produced in a healthy way, in a healthy soil. And it even improves the environment in most of the cases because it's based on agro biodiversity. And it's culturally appropriate because it's based on the knowledge of farmers. It doesn't erode the knowledge of farmers. It brings in knowledge. Knowledge has to come in. And farmers are happy to know different ways of doing things. For example, we have this new program which we call in AFSA, Healthy Soil and Healthy Food. And we are working with 15 centers coming from Southern, Eastern, and Western Africa. And we in every week we have a webinar, and we are bringing in people from Australia, from other parts of Africa, from the US, from Europe, from Latin America, to talk to them. So on different techniques of handling their land and their farm. They are happy. So you can bring in more knowledge, but agroecology is based also on the culture of the people. And it's on the rights of the people is very much important because we are talking about the rights to the seed and the rights to the land. So that's how I contrast the importance of agroecology, and that's how I see it basically.
So if I could ask, in your mind, is there a role for technologies like genetic modification in food sovereignty or in the food systems of the future?
Question is for what? When every technology should have an answer. And in the concept of food sovereignty also, I think in our understanding, I think technology is important, very important, but it has to respond to the context, And most of these technologies do come from outside. And there is a philosophy, there is a political agenda behind any technology. Any technology, there is an agenda. And much more than that, I was following the issue of genetically modified organisms and now gene editing for more than 2 decades. Yeah, I'm just reading and following and whatever. And when I did my biology, I did also studied some genetic engineering, so I could understand the science. And I didn't find any evidence up to now to convince me that going into a GMO genetically modified direction is the right way for Africa or for any part of the globe, for food production, because there is much better way of doing food production. And I just listed, the kind of my criteria of any technology or any approach are, do they tick those important elements, the people who are promoting GMO say that even in the conventional agriculture, without GMOs, genetic modification happens. So what's the different thing that we do? But there is no way that you are inserting a new unrelated gene into the genome of an organism in conventional breeding systems. So we are against, as a group, we are against GMOs. Because where they are practiced, even in Africa, it's a failure. There is no success. And even now, without the introduction of GMOs, because of conventional agriculture, the introduction of high input variety seeds, we are rapidly losing our seeds, our farmers' varieties, rapidly. If I give you an example, in 2010, I went to local committee to do participatory mapping in that committee, and we stayed with the local committee for 5 days to do the mapping. And they told us when we discussed about this, that out of the 19 varieties that they have, the barley varieties, they've lost, I think, the time, out of the 19, they lost 13 of them. They had 6 of them they had. That's to the introduction of these conventional seeds. And so what would that do to the erosion of the seed diversity at the local community level? And we know that, the environment is changing in the context of climate change, any uncertainties. You need diversity, not uniformity. So diversity is very, very critical. Anything which promotes uniformity, anything which is controlled from outside, anything that we have no idea about, anything which we don't have control around is not a good technology for us in general.
I see. Understood. One of the things you've mentioned a couple of times, and I wonder if this is related, is knowledge. And I know that a major concern for many people regarding the role or the impact of genetic modification and GMOs in food systems relates to intellectual property. And so I wonder if you'd comment a little bit more on how you understand the importance of knowledge and learning, and how seeds even and practices sort of represent a kind of sort of intellectual property that as it relates to food sovereignty.
You see, IPR in food system is crazy. The maize has not come from Africa. We are one of the main maize consuming continent, Mm-hmm. It has come from Mexico. Tomato, we don't know tomatoes. Wheat, where did wheat come from? Who has an intellectual property right on all this? Some years ago, this food were going from one place to another place, and we're all growing them. And we're happy that, farmers do try them on their land when they found them growing, when they know the taste, when they like them, they grow them. You see? We've shared. Now we have teff, for example, in Ethiopia. Teff is growing in the US now, in South Africa, and some other continents are also practicing it. Ethiopia is the center of origin of so many crops. We don't have any intellectual property rights on them. That's how it should be, you see? That's how it should be. The fact that somebody is saying that they have created this seed or that seed is not true. It's a big lie, because now they have, the argument is that, we need this kind of IPR because without them, there will not be innovation. Is that true? Is a very important question. A lot of innovations are happening in publicly funded institutions, and these companies have taken appropriated these publicly funded institutions, and they have appropriated the technology of these publicly funded institutions, and they patented them or have an IPR on them, you see? So, yeah, we're fighting, when I say we are fighting, one of the things that we are fighting with is this intellectual property rights in any forms, you see? Mm-hmm. So we don't support that. Because it's possible to be innovative, to create innovation in so many ways. I'm talking about the food system,
Yeah.
The food related to seed, food related issues. But maybe in other areas, for example, mobile phones and maybe it works in that direction, in music, in books, and whatever. There's a lot of issues around them. I read about some of the issues in the US also. But I don't know whether I've responded to you, but the idea of IPR does not go with food sovereignty.
So if we scaled up a little bit, thinking again about your work with the Alliance and issues facing food sovereignty and food systems in Africa, what would you consider? You know, everybody talks about population growth and the need to increase food production and perhaps climate change, but what would you say is the most overlooked or maybe misunderstood issue, for families and communities in families in the communities where you work?
Um, I think as a network, we're fighting with the narrative.
Mm.
This big development model. Everybody talks about transforming African agriculture. If you click transforming African agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
you'd find a lot of initiatives, and they are led by very powerful actors. These powerful actors are philanthrocapitalists, Rockefeller, Gates, this kind of Warren, all this Warren Buffett and all these actors, and aid agencies, and government, even the business, even our own elites, which are the products of these big agricultural universities. Have the narrative. The narrative now is Africans cannot feed themselves because they don't have the money, the resources. So business has to come in. For business has to come, we have to change our laws. We are changing our seed laws, regulation around investment, trade regulations, weakening our system, our frontiers, so many things, and infrastructure for business. So business, relationship with business. That's the one part of the narrative. Land in the hands of African agriculture is not productive, so we have to bring in some actors to farm it, so that prompts land grabbing. African seeds are very weak, not productive, so we have to bring in new seeds. That's what's driving GMOs. These are backward seeds, long time. They've functioned for so many years. Population is increasing, and also, what Africans need is a lot of calories. So we need to produce more food. These kind of things. We need land without chemicals that not produce, and the chemicals are needed for productivity. So these are very, very powerful narratives supported by a lot of statistics. People can produce you hundreds of mind-blowing statistics for that. Africa is called the new frontiers now for business, especially for agribusiness. New frontiers, you can have a lot of figures, and governments are told that if they could open their doors and their institutions, then only through agriculture they can really go miles,
Mm.
So this is the biggest threat, one of the biggest threats for African agriculture, and it's taking root. The reason is it can't even go into the DNA of some Africans, that they think that without this, there's no way. So even defeating that narrative is very, very difficult. And also, there is a young continent. So the population is exploding, obviously. But this population, if we could have a better models of development, it can be a resource, Right. Those arguments, the population argument is debunked in so many instances. I'm not saying that if it is not controlled, it's not if it's not used in the right way, if the governance structure is not in the right way, then population can be a problem, especially young half educated population can really be problematic, as we see now in this social media. The social media, now my country is in a big conflict, in a big problem, and social media is playing to fuel this conflict now. And the young are going to the social media, and that's the truth. The people don't discern the kind of knowledge that they are getting from social media. Social media is a problem. I don't know how many people understand that conflict can be one of the bigger problems in Africa. Ethnicity, where Africa, you go to any one country, a lot of ethnic group in Africa, and the rising ethnicity in Africa is part of the problem. I think to any kinds of food sovereignty and agroecology movement, that would be a challenge. But if you're asking me to pick one big problem also, I will pick unplanned urbanization as one of the biggest problem. You see? I can give you a couple of examples. I have been to Uganda, Kampala, some 16 years ago. The airport, that area around the airport is called Entebbe. Between Entebbe and Kampala, the capital city, is about 40 kilometers. And some 60, 70 years ago, I think, I drove from Entebbe to Kampala. There were few houses. But now, the two places are connected by houses. So, but if this was really planned, very well planned, that wouldn't have been a problem. But it is not. You drive in any direction from the Addis Ababa, from the capital town in Addis Ababa, and you'd see all these slums, And you go to any African country, you can go to Lagos, or you can go to Senegal, Dakar, everywhere unplanned urbanization is very, very problematic. It's hugely costly in so many ways. It's a rife place also for a lot of crimes and other social-related problems. So unplanned, it eats up also rural areas, neighboring rural areas, which are very much fertile. That's what we are seeing almost everywhere. It eats up, the trees, big trees, because, Anyway, yes.
So then, with all of these different sort of issues behind us in our conversation, as you know, the United Nations is planning a global food security summit, or global food systems summit, pardon me, for 2021. If you or your organization could put one thing on the agenda, what do you think it would be?
A very interesting question. Some weeks ago, we have decided not to join it. At all, as Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. The civil society mechanism under the FAO and other social movements have already criticized it. Mainly how the process has started. They have started it in the wrong foot, They didn't consult anybody. Really actors which are part of the problem of the food system are key actors now in this food summit. And the food system paradigm is linear, this food production, this value chain thinking. Food production, storage, processing, distribution, whatever. They're talking about that, but food system, as we understand, includes the surrounding ecology, there's gender issues, there's a diversity issue, there is a resilience issue, there's a lot of, it's an ecosystem by itself. So that understanding around the food system is not right. It's not multilateral. I know that involvement of government is very much minimal. So due to so many actors, we've opted not to join it in any form up to now, even though we were asked in a direct way by the special envoy. They wrote to us to be part of the champions group, that group, and the membership said no. At least at this stage, the way we see it, it's very difficult for us to participate because we don't feel that we can change anything. But we are monitoring it, how things are going. We are speaking with the people who are central part of the whole thing. So I must disappoint you. I don't have any.
But do you think there's a role for that sort of international level sort of collaboration? These summits. Just for the goals that your organization has to achieve.
That's why we're mad that they have started this in a very wrong way. If they had started it with a consultation of the civil society, because over the last 30 years, the civil society was working on this issue day and night. It's a wealth of knowledge, of analysis, work on ground, and synthesis of that work on ground. There's a lot of work there on that. So instead of these macho actors coming and saying, "Oh, food system," kind of thing, we were hoping that after COVID, this pandemic, everybody's talking about the rethinking of the food system in general. Right. Because it's a food system, it's a screwed food system that brought COVID in the beginning, to begin with. So we were all hoping, but it has started from the wrong foot. So yes, the global level discussion, global level of raising this agenda is very, very much important. But the process is as much important as the result,
I see. Yeah. You mentioned COVID, and it made me wonder, how has that in particular impacted your work, created challenges or opportunities, or maybe you could comment on that?
I think in terms of opportunity, I think our work volume has increased. The people could sit at their places and start to think. I mean, we start to actually think, about working, about relationship with each other as a network, and about our agenda. It has given us that time because we're traveling around like hell to meet partners, talk to people, and whatever. So that was one opportunity, and we organized also 2-3 big events, webinars and conferences, virtual. If it was face-to-face, maybe we would have had a limited number of people, but this has allowed us to reach a wider community. So it has given us the opportunity to explore other ways of working rather than meeting face-to-face. In that way, yes. But it was also problematic in so many ways, because there are things that you cannot do virtually. It's a very exhaustive process, this virtual process. It has also impacted a lot of our groups, a lot of communities. So the groups, communities start to engage, to alleviate the problems around their community. And one thing that we did was also to mobilize funding to help highly stressed communities as much as we can. We cannot reach so many of them. I think in both ways. But the most important thing is, I think it has made it very clear that the area that we are working, agroecology in the context of food sovereignty is the right approach.
Excellent. So perhaps we can sort of end the last question I have for you, unless you think that there's something I've missed, is to sort of leave this on a positive note. I'm curious if there's something that you're working on right now that has you particularly excited or optimistic for the future.
I think I've already mentioned them to some extent. There are two things. One is this food system policy. I mean, I'm not saying that policy will fix things, but we are using this opportunity to really explore the food system in some detail in some African countries, and really propose something to the African Union. I think the process, we are very much aware of that the process is as much important as the result. So the process will galvanize local actors, farmers, fisher folks, pastoralists, and academicians, government, even some entrepreneurs. So that was a very, very good, that's a very good work. And this healthy soil and healthy life initiative also is a very, very critical initiative. We are working, we have every week a webinar with a range of farmers. You could see a computer sitting and some 15, 20 farmers sitting in front of the computer and listening to somebody talking about, their methodology, of how they are dealing with the soil. That was really, really encouraging, to see this kind of exchange and programs. And this is a 5-year program. We are going to start it on ground starting next year. We have also on climate, we are working to integrate the agroecology agenda in climate spaces, climate policy spaces. That's moving very, very well also. And we have started to research on agroecological entrepreneurship.
Interesting.
And in the context of the territorial markets, So that's going on very well. There's so many things that are going around.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Million Belay, I wish you best of luck with that and all of those projects. They sound really interesting, and I hope to be able to stay in touch with you to learn more and about the work that you're doing. It's really important, and I appreciate you joining us for the summit to share some information about that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Really appreciate it.